Okay, so Japanese food. Uh, First unit, we're going to go through international foods. I'm really excited about it, and this is one of my favorite food cultures. So we're going to get right into it. This is a little PowerPoint just to kind of help explain some of the topics in the study guide. So, Japanese cuisine is really characterized by foods with a natural taste and appearance. And Japanese cuisine, we can say, is one of the most elegantly simple in the world, right? The whole aim of the kitchen is to enhance the intrinsic qualities of whatever is being cooked and to serve it in bowls and plates that add a graceful note to that beauty, okay? Equally important, and maybe even more important, is the characteristic of seasonal feeling. In Japanese, it's called kitsetsukan, and that's not important for you to know, but it is a word that they have, which is an appreciation of foods appearing at their appointed times in spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Japan does have four distinct seasons, and each one is respected really uh, thoroughly with what they use as far as local seasonal produce, meats, and how they're cooked. All that is taken into account. If we look on the right, we can see Japan is an island, so obviously we can make some conclusions about that, and we will use these kind of conclusions to make broader ideas and discussion topics about why Japan uses specific ingredients, why they use specific cooking techniques, and how their history of being a semi-isolated island has affected their food culture. On the left, you just show that there's lots of different landscapes throughout Japan: mountainous areas, rainforest areas, valleys, all that type of thing. The Japanese meal structure is different to our Western one. There are many one pot dishes cooked at a table and served with rice that provide a whole meal. More often, the courses are presented all at once and eaten in no order, right? So you may just get if we're sitting at a restaurant, things just come as they come, and there's no specific order. Traditionally, diners sit on cushions. If you look in the bottom left, that's like a really swanky version of a Japanese dining table. Diners sit on cushions around the low table, about 1 foot from the floor. Each person is served the whole meal in individual bowls or plates and platters, and unlike the tableware of the West, Japanese dishes are often oblong or square and beautifully decorated. For a main meal, there's always rice, there's always a type of soup, a vegetable, and usually like some type of pickled dish. Fish, meat, poultry, shellfish are also all served in small portions. It's not a meat heavy culture. Desserts are not intrinsic to this type of food, although there are a few, and we won't go into it today, but we can talk about it later. Fresh fruit is by far a more popular choice, and anyone who has eaten or bought fruit in Japan knows that it's revered really highly and is usually quite expensive. Okay, starches, noodles and rice, right? So what we got here first is noodles. There's a lot of different types of noodles that are specifically Japanese. If we look in the bottom here, that's dried soba, which is a grayish brownish buckwheat noodle. It can be either eaten hot or cold. It's a dipping noodle, so when it's eaten cold, it's dipped in a sauce and eaten. Udon, which we're looking at right here, thick noodle made from wheat flour. There's also somen, which is these guys, which is a delicate thin white noodle made from wheat flour as well, and it's often eaten cold. If we look here, we have harusame, which is cellophane noodles. You find cellophane noodles in a lot of Asian cultures, and then there's a bunch of other different types. There's those factory made ramen noodles right there. That's Chinese style noodles in the middle, and then a bunch of other different types of dried noodles. So noodles, huge noodle culture. Rice is also a giant part of Japanese culture. If we look on the right, there's some old school Japanese rice cookers. There's a rice paddy on the bottom left, but a lot of the culture revolves around rice. Rice is used to ferment foods. It's eaten as a staple. It's also made. You can make sake with it, which is rice wine, and then mirin, which is sweetened sake, and something that we're going to go over later called koji, which is a fermented rice paste used to seasoned food, and it's also used to start miso production. We're not going to go too deep into that, but just be aware rice has a million different uses in Japan. One thing that we are going to talk about a lot in this unit is dashi, right? Right here, is Japanese kombu, which is dried bull kelp. And over here, we can't. It's I cropped the picture poorly, but here you see little shaved flakes of fish. Katsuobushi is a petrified, dried version of skipjack tuna, and it's smoked. And when it's super hard, they shave it using this block right here, and you get these little flakes. And those two items combined at a really low heat create dashi, which is one of the staples of Japanese culture or Japanese food culture. It's a flavorful broth used to start a lot of things and flavor a lot of different dishes. Fruits and vegetables. There's a lot to talk about here, so we won't go over everything, but some things that are pretty common are things like burdock root, which is this skinny guy right here. Daikon, big white radish, different types of mushrooms like matsutake, enoki, and they use a lot of dried shiitake mushrooms. Ginger root, obviously, garlic, obviously, green onions, and then a bunch of different types of seaweed. We talked about kombu. There's also things like wakame, nori, anoriko, all different types of seaweed. We'll go over them later. Okay, and then fruits, right? Big fruit culture. Some things that are special is over here we got Japanese plums, which are ume, and then Japanese ingredient of yuzu and sudachi, which are citrus fruits, which are pretty unique flavor profiles. Also, things like melons, persimmons, grapes, peaches. But fruit is a big part of the Japanese diet. Fermented items. Okay, so we talked about top right. That's shiokoji, which is fermented. It's a fermented rice product used to flavor a lot of things. And the first step in making miso, which is all these things, there's different types of miso. Shiro miso, which is white miso. You see the shinsu miso, which is these yellow ones, and then aka miso, which is really fermented, the red one. Miso production is started with fermented rice, and then they use it to ferment soybeans. So it's a soybean product. And then down here, there's another thing. It's called yuzu kosho, which is fermented paste of Japanese citrus and chilies. So they do use a lot of fermented products. Think about pre-refrigeration, right? We need to find ways to make things last. So this is how we did it. All right, let's go into like some specific traditional Japanese meals. Japan is a food culture of specialization. So often you're going to find that Japanese food establishments or restaurants only serve one style of food. I'm going to go over some of the many styles. Okay, there's a lot more than what I'm just going to talk about, but these are some of the ones that I think are important. So donburi, right? Uh, it can refer to the bowl or the dish itself. Any type of don, D-U-N, is a big, deep-footed bowl that consists of a base layer of hot steamed rice and then topped with any combination of meat, fish, vegetables, eggs. And there's usually like a spicy condiment or some type of pickle there as well. Oftentimes, it can be served with a dashi-based stock to serve alongside it, which will be used to flavor the rice after you eat stuff on top, or just mix it in all together. Yakitori. This is a meal of skewered chicken grilled over Japanese charcoal called binchotan, and that's in your study guide. That type of charcoal can hold very high heat, so it's quite useful. Yakitori restaurants will serve all the different parts of chicken on skewers and use different flavoring ingredients, cooking times, cooking temperature to optimize the flavor and texture of each part of the chicken. So if we're looking here, you can see that they really do cut it into a lot of different types and they season and flavor it different ways. So you'll use everything. Like you'll use the hearts, you'll use the kidneys, you'll use the gizzards. They'll use all the different types of skin. They'll use all the different types of white meat, all the different types of dark meat. Okay, sushi. We all know a little bit about sushi, but I think oftentimes we are aware of the Americanized version of it. Sushi is a Japanese meal consisting of room temperature seasoned rice. A lot of people think the rice is supposed to be cold. It's not. It's either served slightly warm or body temperature. And then the fish or seafood on top is cured or seasoned in some way. It's a misconception to think that sushi is just straight up raw fish. It's often either salted or cured in vinegar for a little bit, or something is done to it. Maybe it's like tataki style, which means that it's cooked very quickly on the outside, or it's smoked. There's lots of preparations that are done. There's many different types of establishments that that serve different type of sushi experiences, ranging from affordable conveyor belt sushi, which is what you see on the left, and then higher end omakase countertop places. Like omakase means the chef's choice. It's like a tasting menu. The picture in the middle is the progression of an omakase meal all the way through. Okay. Um, if you're at a high end place, it's not a place where you put soy sauce or wasabi on your things. They do it for you. They put it right in front of you, and you're expected to eat it immediately and not mess with it. Most of the time, at those places, sushi is eaten with your hands. A lot of people think the fish is the big part in sushi, but really it is the rice. Most sushi chefs would agree. Sushi rice is really particularly cooked, and then after it's cooked, it's cooled down and then seasoned with vinegar and sugar. Okay, each chef has a different preference of what type of vinegar, what type of sugar, sometimes salt. They have their own proprietary blends in Japan, and they all do it differently and hold it very near and dear. So that is a big part of it. Now, there's two main ways sushi is served: nigiri, Nigiri. It's in your study guide, which is all this, which is like a clumped mound of rice with the sliced fish on top. And then also over here, you see like Americanized versions of maki. Maki is a roll, Maki. Okay. In America, you always see maki with rice on the outside. In Japan, they have the seaweed on the outside. I really don't understand why, but why America or the Western world decided to put the rice on the outside, but it's something that we did over here, maybe to hide the seaweed, I guess. Ramen. This is the first thing we're going to cook in class, or that I'm going to demo in class. There is a lot of different types of ramen. Okay, for the most part, ramen is a dish that consists of noodles and broth with a variety of toppings as well. The type of noodle we use in ramen is something we call an alkaline noodle. It's based off Chinese noodles. And having a basic or alkaline ingredient in there, like baking soda in the dough, makes those yellow noodles that you see. And they're chewy and they're firmer. And that's because of baking soda or some type of alkali. There's many different types of different styles of ramen with different noodle shapes, broths, toppings, based on the different areas of Japan, whether it's a town or a prefecture, right? So you'll hear like, oh, this is Hokkaido style ramen, or this is Sapporo style ramen, or this is Osaka style ramen. So a lot of that is based on where it originated from. There's five ingredients, and we'll talk about this in our lecture. There's five ingredients that make up ramen: the noodle, the broth, the toppings. There's always a flavored oil, which is poured on top. It could be like a scallion oil or a burnt garlic oil. And then there's something called tare, Tare. And that is either a base of salt or soy sauce. It's a liquid that is used to flavor the whole soup. So it's the first thing that goes in the bowl. A little soy sauce or salt based liquid that's highly flavored. And then the soup goes over that. And then you make the bowl. I'll show you how to do it on Monday. Kaiseki. Okay, this is a formal multi-course meal that focuses on local and seasonal ingredients. It's a big representation of Japanese culture. The goal of a kaiseki chef is to encapsulate the time and place of the food. Like we're talking about seasonality, geography, topography, and they're going to use the flavor, the aroma, and the presentation of the food to showcase the terroir or the time and place of the region. Okay, kaiseki will always include at least five components: a small bite or an appetizer, a sashimi course, a simmered dish, a steamed dish, and a grilled dish. Okay. On top of that, there'll be a whole lot of other things too. It's not just five courses. It's usually quite a few things, but it's always going to focus on at least those five things, and then it's going to focus on all the five tastes as well: sour, sweet, salty, bitter, and umami. Umami is something that we'll talk about the whole week when we're talking about Japan, but I guess the most basic way to explain it is the taste of savoriness or the deliciousness regarding a savory item. A lot of people in Japan refer to umami as a feeling or sense of satisfaction as well. It's not always relating to food. Shabu shabu, and then we're gonna kind of relate this to another foods culture. Hopefully, you have that in your mind. But shabu shabu is a nabe mono, N-A-B-E mono style dish, or a nabe, N-A-B-E. It's in your study guide, which is a dish that's served in a hot pot. Uh, it's a dish that has a bunch of thinly sliced meat, fish, vegetables, and you quickly simmer them in dashi until they're cooked, and then you put them in dipping sauces and eat them over rice. Shabu shabu is a family style meal where many people are eating around the same simmering pot of dashi. Once all the meat and vegetables and fish and all that stuff's eaten, the remaining soup is usually consumed with whatever rice you have left over too. So every part is eaten. Bento. So bento is a great example of how widely varied one style of food can be in Japan. So it's a single portion boxed meal, whether it's homemade or you buy it. The style of boxes and the food inside the boxes vary greatly and can range from extremely cheap, like you can buy it at 7-Eleven in Japan, to profoundly expensive, like boutique versions where they're hundreds or if not thousands of dollars. A traditional bento holds rice or noodles, cold meat or fish, and vegetables, maybe a pickle as well. However, as I said earlier, there's a massive variety in what can be stored in a bento box. Sometimes they have different types of boxes that can hold different types of foods, like they can be like soup ones or hot bento boxes, ones that hold liquid, all types of different compartmentalized boxes. So bento is huge. A big thing is if you go on a train ride, it's like customary to buy a bento box and eat it on your train ride. A lot of kids have bentos made by their parents that could have like cute little animals made out of like vegetables or something, and they get really unique. This is one of my favorite aspects of Japanese food, Yoshoku cuisine, which is Japanese food that was influenced by the West. So we're going to talk about how Japan was isolated for a very long time by the shogunate, or the military ruler. In 1868, there was this era called the Meiji Restoration, and it was an event that restored imperial rule back to the Emperor Meiji, Japan. Okay, what happened is Emperor Meiji allowed Japan to become westernized and open their borders again, and this led to massive industrialization and westernization of Japan after a long era of isolationism. Okay, what that means is that they started getting affected by Western food culture. A lot of Yoshoku cuisine is derived from European dishes and have Western names written in Japanese dialect, like katsu. We all know what katsu is, or we mostly do. Katsu is the Japanese way of saying cutlet, right? It's a cutlet. It's a pork cutlet, tonkatsu. Hamburg steak, hamburger, right? German style mincemeat served with brown sauce, right? Which is like demi-glace in French food. They call it demi-glace in Japan as well. Korokke, which is croquette, right? Again, another Western European dish, and then sandos, which is different types of Japanese sandwiches, which are really cool. They cut the crust off of them, they make them look really pretty, and there's always a nice cross. So Yoshoku cuisine has has kind of taken over and has it's a very big part of the Japanese diet as well. It's really interesting. Ketchup is extremely popular in Japan. Is like one of the most commonly used ingredients in this type of food. So that goes to show that history can affect what we're talking about. So that's, I believe, all we got for that. And I'll see you on Monday.